Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's stories consist of creepy customers, creepy patients, and night shift horror stories. A few weeks ago, I was asked to give a shout out to Shannon, whose birthday was just 2 days ago on the 27th, so happy late birthday, Shannon. Thank you for watching my videos and getting your kid into it too, as they requested the shout out for you. So, happy birthday. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hey everyone. So for some context, I work at a Walmart overnight. Our lunch break is at midnight, so I went to grab some food, then sat in my car in the parking lot, which is usually empty during that time, except for my coworkers' vehicles and the occasional person sleeping in their car. I was sitting there eating for a while when I noticed a car began to circle the parking lot 4 or 5 times, and the whole time I was very wary of what they were doing. I'm a 19-year-old girl and about 5'3". Eventually, another car, this one was dark gray, showed up and began doing the same. After a couple minutes, the white one drove in circles around my car twice, and the gray car did the same. Then they both pulled up in the parking spaces on both sides of me, so I said fuck that and put my car to drive so fast. I don't know what they wanted, but it was creepy. Okay, so this happened last night. I'm a female, 19, and I work as a maintenance worker at Walmart, and I work the night shift, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. I have to go change all the outside parking lot trash cans, and we usually do it in the beginning of my shift when there's still traffic outside from customers and the day crew leaving. Last night though was different. I didn't get outside until about 12 to 1 a.m. There's absolutely no one that I could see outside. I start collecting the trash, and when I get to the furthest one from the store, a white van I hadn't noticed before turns on the high beams, pointing straight at me. It was about 20 feet away, and technically not in our actual Walmart parking lot. This doesn't bother me too bad, and I just keep on going. Then I hear a door open, and look up to see a person getting out of the passenger side and getting to the side sliding door of the van. This is when I start feeling uncomfortable. Next, the van turns its hazards on. I froze up slightly at this point and just stared for a few minutes. Then the hazards turn off, and whoever was in the driver's seat starts flashing a flashlight at me as if trying to get my attention. I was already clearly staring at the van. I was frozen until the lights stopped flashing, then I just got the rest of the trash and got the fuck out of there. I told my manager, even pointed out the van to him, but he said there's nothing you can do as they're not in our parking lot. I have to work again tonight and decided to call the cops if it happens again. Whatever those people in the van were up to, it couldn't be good. I'm a doctor in surgery, and one day I got a case of a man, no big deal, some cuts to sew. I won't give details, but he was around 30 years old and had a wound that needed 4 stitches on his arm. When I started to clean the wound, strange and creepy compliments had already started. How I got a beautiful doctor. You have beautiful pupils. You are beautiful. You have a nice smell. I just ignored him until he grabbed me by the hips and pulled me towards him. I yelled, "What the hell?" and asked him to take his hands off of me and call security. He laughed and asked me why I was so dramatic. I asked him to leave or I was going to report him. And then he got up and said, "You know girls like you shouldn't turn down such offers. Your time of beauty is only going to last a short time." I was in shock all day. I told my colleagues about it, but luckily I haven't seen him since and hope I never do. I'm a 25-year-old female and I work overnight at a store as a stalker. When I first started, a guy around my age got hired a couple months after me. He started hanging around other coworkers and I on break, and we eventually became friends, even hanging out alone on break sometimes. He seemed pretty normal at first, agreeable, and a good conversationalist. He told me that he was autistic, which I think helped me make excuses for him a bit in hindsight. I was in a bad place mentally at the time, and having someone validate me felt nice at first. But then he started getting touchy. I would eventually be telling him more personal stuff, and he would start to rub my back. I didn't want to be rude at first, so I didn't say anything, but then he did it more often. I told him to stop and he seemed to be sorry, until doing it again eventually. I was alone with him all these incidents, and the look on his face when he did eventually showed predatory vibes, and not like the friend I thought I had. Around the time he started doing this, he also confessed to me something he did in the past to a friend of his. You can probably guess what it's along the lines of. He acted quite remorseful and said him and his friend are civil now, and that it was a long time ago. I think he even cried a bit. I'm generally a compassionate person who believes in second chances, so while this is when more red flags started going off, I still hung out with him a bit, although more distantly. It didn't help that his general demeanor was one of a pitiful person. Nice act. He hung out with my boyfriend and I a couple times. He lived near us, so we were kind of excited to have someone to hang out with at first, but he just kept on getting weirder and weirder the few times we hung out. He always seemed to be trying to one-up my boyfriend, in a sarcastic manner. There was also a strange time when he did this deep belly laugh at an explicit sexual song playing on his car radio that my boyfriend and I just felt kind of uncomfortable about. He would make it a point not to drink that much around us when we were drinking, despite bragging about how much he could down. He rubbed my back yet again at one point while I was drunk when my boyfriend left the room, trying to pass it off as comforting. He generally tried to be flirtatious whenever my boyfriend left the room. Eventually, enough was enough, and I cut him off, although I still have to work with him. This was last summer. We weren't even friends for that long. Ever since then, he's come in early every night to put out my work stuff for me, leave me food and water and gifts, stuff that I've mentioned in conversations before. Parks near me and waits for me to leave the parking lot, so we can drive together, I guess. One time, he waited a half an hour as I was chatting with another coworker. He waits in front of his house for me to pass by him to get to my house. I have to turn down his road to get to my road. Still says the weird phrases my boyfriend and I use. Text despite being ignored. Left a note saying, "You really do hate me," on my work cart after months of ignoring him. He's written my full initials on my work cart in marker, which he remembers somehow, and leaves the same one out for me every day. I always try to erase them, even wrote the word "stop" on it once, but the next day he wrote them again. Whenever he walks by me, he looks sad or pissy. Managers have talked to him and a report is going through HR right now, but I just hope it doesn't escalate. Despite being talked to, he still leaves my card out and stuff for me with some water and rewrites my initials. Update: nothing really seemed to have happened with HR so far, except for him no longer waiting for me in the parking lot. I guess the manager talked to him about that. I told him to stop leaving my work cards out for me, and he acted like I was being unreasonable. Then he wrote my initials again on my work card while I wasn't looking, as well as a smiley face, which it seems he also drew on every window of my car the other day. Guess I left my doors unlocked because one of them was drawn on the inside. He's fucking obsessed. I work part-time at a grocery store, and I usually work the closing shift. At about 30 minutes to closing, a lady comes to my register. She is polite, friendly, and seemed very normal. She pays for her groceries, she leaves. Seemed normal to me. About 10 minutes after we closed, I headed out to my bike, but she stopped me before I could leave the store, claiming that she had left her phone inside and that she needed to get it. She hadn't left her phone though. It would have been at the register, and I thoroughly cleaned it as well as the surrounding areas before clocking out. But I offered to go in and check anyways, because maybe it could have been dropped on the floor. I wanted to go home, but luckily my manager offered to call her phone, so I headed to my bike to get going. The moment I take the lock off my bike, she drives over to me, making small talk. It's a bit weird, seeing that I'm clearly trying to go home and she doesn't know me at all. She tells me that I have a very cool bike, asking me where I got it. I explained to her that it's electric and that I got it from Amazon. She then tells me that she didn't know they made electric bikes, but then tells me a few minutes later about how she's been looking to get an electric bike for a while now. She asked to take a picture of my bike, and then suddenly asks me why I'm still wearing a mask, going on about how it could give me sinus problems. I decide not to take off my mask since she's taken a photo, which I noticed the camera was aimed more so at me than at my bike, even though I stepped away so that she could get a better view of the bike itself. Unknown to me, my manager and another coworker were watching the whole interaction, and after the woman left, went over to ask me if everything was okay. I didn't really think much of it, telling them that I was fine and that she just wanted to know about my bike. I headed home, but on my way, thought a little bit more about the interaction. She came to the store claiming to have lost her phone, but had it the whole time. She took a picture with it. She kept repeating my name in our conversation as often as she could, almost like she was trying to memorize it. She took a photo of me as well as my mode of transportation, all while trying to get me to take off my mask right before taking the picture, as if to be able to catch my entire face. Sorta creepy. Even weirder was when I turned back to the store to see if she was still there. I saw a police car which, after leaving the parking lot, turned on its sirens and sped off in the direction that the lady left in. Maybe I'm overthinking, but the interaction just seemed really strange. Anyways, let me know if you think I'm overthinking things, or if you'd be creeped out too. When COVID started, I was off for about 2 months. Fortunately, I work for a big company that paid us throughout. But I'm both the type that hates to be cooped up and the type that loves money, so I took a temporary position at a nursing home where my mom worked. Got swabbed, all that. Once I confirmed to be clean, I started the next day. They were desperate for the help. My mom and I didn't really used to see each other often, but when the family would get together, she would tell me stories about residents who would often misbehave. No names, nothing like that, just funny stories, and, in the case of one guy, the scary stories. Now, Mom didn't mention any names, but she had mentioned that the particularly creepy guy was considerably younger than the rest of the residents. I should clarify here that she mentioned this well before the idea that I would be working with her. Most of the residents were well into their twilight years, and this guy was in his mid-40s, ended in the nursing home because of serious illnesses that had each caused brain damage. That said, he was still fully lucid, just unable to properly take care of himself. Still, that didn't stop him from purposely shitting his pants, just so that he could have the nurses wipe his genitalia while he said things like, "You should give me a blowjob," or, "Are you gonna rub some cream on my balls?" He never did this to male nurses. He just sat there silently while they cleaned him up. But it didn't matter if you were a 60-year-old female or a 20-year-old. He'd be as vulgar as he could, though he did seem to prefer the younger ones. He'd also, on occasions, try to grab at the nurses. It got to the point where they wouldn't allow certain nurses to go into his room alone. Cue my arrival at the home. I don't have medical background, so my only real job was to run shit back and forth for the doctors and nurses and deliver food to the residents. One of which, of course, was the creepy dude. Let's call him Mark. Now, as much as I hate to admit it, despite being an almost 30-year-old man, I'm probably what you call slender. I'm about 5'11", and at the time, I was about 120 pounds. I also had hair halfway down my back. This is important. I also had a beard down to the middle of my chest. This is also important. I delivered to Mark multiple times. He'd seen me face to face. I never had an issue with him. Like I said, he didn't give the dudes issues. Until one day he approached me from behind while I was bringing snacks around for some of the residents. I was handing a snack to my absolute favorite resident, a sweet old lady who I'll call Wanda, 98 with a prosthetic leg and still full of life, and I hear, "Hey sweetie, come over here." It barely registers in my mind because there's a bunch of people around and it's not uncommon to hear him pull that type of thing. Wanda and I kind of rolled our eyes at each other and waited for the vulgar bit. Then Wanda said, "Hey," and pointing behind me. A second later I felt someone squeezing the back of my arm hard. I spun around, at which this point he saw who I was, and he went paper white. Some of the real staff had seen this going on and dragged him back to his room. I was told to go on my break. Wanda and I had pudding together. Next time I saw him, he was still a dick, but didn't seem to hold a grudge. Not sure if he even remembered it. Wanda and I continued to eat our pudding and joke about the situation afterwards. It was our regular, daily thing until I went back to my real job. I don't know what Mark's doing other than, as my mom who still works there says, still being an asshole, but Wanda's great-grandson is going to graduate soon, and she's super proud. My brother used to work the graveyard shift at a grocery store. Usually, there were 3 employees during that shift. Everyone started at 9 p.m., except for my brother. He started at 3 a.m. I remember him telling me creepy stories that would happen there. One time, a guy got robbed while walking to the store entrance from the parking lot. Another time, one of the guys was throwing out the trash and saw a homeless guy sleeping next to the trash. One time my brother was on break sitting in his car and saw a guy looking into cars. There's so many weird and creepy stories he has told me. The most scariest for him is one that he experienced 2 years before he resigned, aka got a better paying job. He had just parked his car and like usual he looked around before getting out. He didn't see anyone and decided to get out. He started walking up to the store when he heard footsteps behind him. He then looks behind him and sees a guy wearing all black. The guy has an oversized jacket and a hoodie on. My brother is walking at a normal pace, and this guy is speed walking. At that point, my brother starts walking faster and puts his hand in his pocket, where he has his box cutter utility knife. As he approaches the entrance, he prays to God that someone opens the door fast. Sometimes he would have to wait up to 10 minutes because the other employees were jerks. Anyways, as he turned the corner, he sees another employee smoking a cigarette in the front entrance of the store. When the creep turns the corner and sees the other guy, he immediately turns around and walks back to where he came from. The other employee asked my brother if that guy was following him. My brother said yes, and that if it wasn't for him being outside, he would have to probably fight this guy. My brother's the most respectful and hard worker I know, but he always tells me that he would not go out without a fight. I would always worry for him because of all the stories he told me. A lot of people would quit because they didn't want to become a victim to those guys. Some even refused to take out the trash alone. I feel like my brother got lucky that night. Even he feels that way. He said in all the 10 years he worked there, he never saw any employee outside, and that it would always take a couple minutes for them to open the door. For all you graveyard shift workers, be aware of your surroundings. This happened to me around the end of summer, beginning of autumn 2020, and I just remembered it, so I decided to post it. I got a new job at the store, and I love this job to bits. After several terrible jobs, this place was a breath of fresh air, lovely atmosphere, amazing coworkers, and most customers were very sweet. I never had a bad day at work until this particular day. So this day was like any other. I was restocking some of the stuff and looking around if any customer needed help. Our boss is very, lack for better words, strict about making sure we always give customers a lot of focus no matter what task we were doing. I put the last few things away on the shelf and turned around to find a man in his late 20s standing right behind me, staring. I put on the friendliest smile and asked him if there's anything I could help him with. He says in broken English that he needs help with some bug repellent or something like that. And I got him to our shelf full of brands, and we go back and forth about what he needs. He finally settles on a brand, and I asked him if there's anything else I can help him with. He asked me for the way back to the register, and I give him a detailed description on the way there. He just looks at me puzzled, and then I ask if he needs me to walk him there, and he nods. As I'm walking him to the register, he starts asking me questions, like if I enjoy my job and such. Normal questions that I answer politely. But then the questions got a bit more personal. He starts asking me about my age, where I live, who I live with, my work schedule. questions people don't really ask employees. Me, a very shy person who doesn't want to upset anyone, I try to answer his questions without actually answering them. We're almost by the register when he stops and turns to look at me, standing a bit too close for my comfort. I stand there, visibly uncomfortable as he says, "I'll be coming back tomorrow to pick you up from work." I laugh awkwardly and say, "I don't know if I'll even be working tomorrow." He pauses for a moment, then says, "Then I'll come by every day. We'll run into each other eventually." I laugh again, thinking that he must be joking, but he's looking dead serious as I do. "We could be friends, you and I. I don't have many friends. You could be my friend." He then walks off to the register all by himself, as he obviously knew the way there. And I stand in place until I can't see him anymore. I look around for a coworker, and I spot my boss. I run up to her, breaking down, as I tell her what just happened, feeling pretty terrible for breaking down, might I add. My boss asks who it was, and I spot him by the door and point to him. My boss walks over and talks to him. What was said I don't know, because I went to the break room to calm down. On my way home, I saw him by the bus stop, and I ended up calling my mom, and she picked me up, since I didn't feel safe going home alone. So, to the creepy customer at my job, I hope to never see you again. Longtime lurker, first time poster. I didn't feel like I was ever in immediate danger by this encounter, but it definitely left a weird taste in my mouth. I like to think that I'm good at picking up whether or not people are creepy when I first meet them, and he definitely gave me the weird vibes. I was working one Sunday night at my job where I'm a server, and 90% of the time our customers are incredibly kind. We have a great regular crowd, and we get to know them really well. However, one day this man came in. He seemed to be in his late 20s. He slowly walked in, stood a few feet away from me, in a lunge-like position. Obviously, putting on my customer service voice, I asked him what I could get for him. He ordered 2 things. I asked him for his name for his order, and he responded, and then asked me for my name. This wasn't that abnormal, but he never broke eye contact, and almost whispered the question. His body language was very odd, and that's what kind of threw me off. He then began asking me more personal questions about myself. He eventually walked off outside, and I couldn't shake off the weird vibe he was giving me. A week later I was working, and he came in at the same time. He walked up to me and said hello, and of course I recognized him. He looked at me and said, "That food last week was delicious," and proceeded to tell me he had a dream about me. Again, the same weird eye contact, weird body language, and whisper tone. Obviously, this would creep anybody out, especially with the way he was acting. I asked him for his name again, and after he gave it to me, he said, "And your name is Ashley," responding with my name. I just nodded. I was uncomfortable, and my coworkers offered to take his food out. After work, I had to go to the gas pump at a place down the street from where I worked. I got out my car and did the usual thing, and look over when I hear my name called. It's none other than the creepy customer. He was working at the gas station, of course. He got uncomfortably close to me. Mind you, this is during COVID times, so people being close to me would make me feel uncomfortable in general. He again started asking me questions about myself, where I was headed, when I worked, just personal things I would never ask a stranger. But what got me this time was his smile. Something about it just made me feel sick. I quickly stepped away, said goodbye, and got into my car. He ended up coming back a few times, but I always had my other coworkers take his orders instead. He eventually stopped coming by. One of my coworkers let me know that I was the only worker he ever started conversations with. Anyway, creepy guy at my work who doesn't break eye contact, whispers, and stands too close to me, and had a dream about me. Please don't come back in.